Hey there. Make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help amazing folks like you find us. We want to continue to grow our spiritual therapist and practitioner space so that more folks committed to helping Black QT plus folks and individuals heal can find us. But we really can't do it without your support. So thank you so much for being a part of our community. Want to stay connected? Sign up for our first quarter moon newsletter, where we share insights twice a month on topics that benefit spiritual therapists and practitioners dedicated to integrating spirituality into their work while staying committed to supporting Black QT plus folks on their spiritual journeys. We promise never to spam you, so head over to our website and sign up today. Go to reclaimingsoulworkpod.com to sign up on our landing page. And make sure you follow us on socials. We are on Instagram at Reclaiming Soul Work and on TikTok at Reclaiming Soul Work as well.
You know, I don't have my script ready, right? So I'm just gonna flow with it. Biani, if you could just send it to me, attach it,
Yeah.
just share it with me to my Real in the Moon, that would be great. Thank you all for being a part of our housekeeping. And yeah, the kind of behind
Welcome
the
to.
scenes aspect of Reclaiming the Soul Work podcast. But usually we just start off by saying, hey, y'all. We are so happy to, be here with you all today and look forward to chatting more on this topic with Erin. Y'all know that we always kind of start off as well, like grounding in the intention that we are on this learning and decolonizing journey together. So we look forward to continue to do that with y'all tonight.
Yes. So we're really excited to delve into the heart of our conversations. We are committed to focusing on the lack of culturally rooted resources to support QT BIPOC folks navigating religious and spiritual trauma. And we're really excited because this season we're focusing on learning, and we're really committed to provide you with the tools, the tips, and the insights to help you on your path of reclaiming to soul work. So y'all, make sure you just sit back and you relax and you get ready to elevate your understanding of mental health and spiritual well-being as we embark on this season of learning. Welcome, y'all. Welcome. So let's just, move right into what we're talking about today. We are so excited. We're so excited for this episode because it felt like Spirit and the universe wanted us to reschedule it. It had to happen today because we were having tech issues, real talk. The last time we tried to do this episode, we were having some tech challenges, and it just felt like it wasn't meant to happen. And I was glad Sequoia was like, it's not working. The internet's not the diviners
Like,
of,
I was like, this is a podcast. If the tech isn't working, we got to do something a little bit different.
Exactly. And I think, like I was telling our guests, like we've been wanting to have this conversation for a minute. We're diving into the experiences of Black queer Christians. We want to talk about what it means to survive religious trauma and still be in relationship to like a Christian practice, right? And as y'all know, right, like our podcast, the focus of our podcast is to center the lived experiences and stories of Black QT plus folks who have faced and continue to face religious and spiritual trauma. And each episode highlights these important and unique voices in our community. But what we're so excited about is our series, which is our Reclaiming Black QT plus Spiritual Practice series. And that we're kicking it off today. And this is where we sort of center the voices of Black QT plus folks who are spiritual and who are in the reclamation journeys of their practices. And we're so excited to have Erin's perspective and experiences. And yeah, I think, whoever's tuning in right now, y'all gonna really be excited because we're gonna talk about deconstruction of Christianity. We're going to talk about where this belief came from, this idea that queers can't be Christian. We're going to talk about why Black queer Christian folks have every right to reclaim their faith. And Erin is going to share insights on, what it means to navigate religious trauma. We're going to talk about the harmful influence of ex-gay rhetoric. And they're going to tell us why they don't read the Bible every day, which is a whole interesting thing because people have a lot of feelings about that. So, we're excited for y'all to really tune in and join us for this important conversation. And just to share again, if you haven't already, make sure to like this episode and subscribe to our channel so others like you can find us. These conversations are really important, y'all. They're necessary. And every subscription helps us reach more people. So can you really just do us a favor right now and just like and subscribe to the channel? Okay, just right now. And if you are really digging what we're bringing, share this episode right now with your friend or somebody you feel like might really resonate with this topic, because we really want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to really engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Biani. You just flew the plane right on in for us. So thank you very much, for ushering us into this conversation. Y'all, usually we start off our podcast, sharing just some information about us for folks who might be tuning in for the first time. So, hey, everybody, my name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns. I'm currently in Charlotte on Catawba Indigenous land. I wear a number of different hats and identify in different ways, and just really glad to be here with you all tonight. I come to this conversation as someone who, as you were kind of bringing us in to this topic, Biani, I was thinking about the practice of Christianity and how that looked different for me. One of the things that I've shared on the podcast and just in different spaces, related to how I grew up and my connection to spirituality. And then now, being more aligned with specifically hoodoo practices. I grew up in Chicago, but the summers I spent in Selma, Alabama with my grandparents and my extended family. And in Chicago, we went to a Christian Baptist, church. And then when I was down south, especially after when my mom and dad divorced, I would, go to church down south, either when I was visiting my family or like I said, when my parents divorced, when I would go visit my dad, I would go to church. And so I went to more of a Southern Baptist church. And, those were two very different experiences. The church that I went to in Chicago, it wasn't a mega church or anything like that. It was a pretty neighborhood community kind of feel to the church in the sense of the size of it. And then, when I was down south, I went to a church where it was just one room. There wasn't a building or anything like that. It was just a one room building, and we would have Sunday school, in the room together. Everybody would be in different sections, different aspects of the church, crowded together, sitting together, with their respective places. But I'm bringing all of that up and kind of painting that picture related to this conversation about why can't we be Christian and queerness? Because even though those settings were very different, there was still a similarity in the sense of the absence of queerness. And so felt the need to, I guess, say, to give that context about how I'm coming into this conversation, and that a lot of my experience growing up was not seeing, ignoring, not bringing up, not having conversations about queerness and people who in the church may or may not have identified in that way. So yeah, that's just a little bit of insight about for me, like how I grew up and like how I've been thinking about this topic, the places that I'm excited to, continue to talk about, and the places even for myself that I continue to heal. So that was a little bit of a long intro, but
I love that. I actually appreciate you grounding us in that because it's making me think that I think the reason I'm really excited about this episode is because I'm also like looking for spaces to heal, like my own relationship, and I'll share a little bit about that. But hey, y'all, Biani, she, they pronouns. I live in Lenape-Hoking land, also known as Philly. Um, my people are from Dominican Republic and the Bronx. And my sun sign is Virgo, rising is Cancer, and my moon is in Aries. And yeah, that's me. I It's funny, because I've been bringing decks every time. I I also want to model that anything that is a tool could be a divination tool, really. And I got this little card deck from Five Below. My kids like Five Below, y'all. And these are just cats with motivational, and I love it. I've been using it with clients. I've been using it with myself, and it's hilarious. It's like the sassiest cats, the cutest little cats, with a little bit of inspiration, and that's what I've been working with. It was like a $2.52. It's a plain card size deck. And listen, I say this because I think sometimes people are like, I need the right tarot card. I need the right oracle cards. And it's like, no, you can find little cards. You can make your own. You can play in cards to also divine with. And, the magic is you. So yeah, that's my little invitation. And this is the one that jumped. Small steps every day. I don't know if you can see it. It's so cute.
that's it. Small
That's
steps
it.
every day. I love that. Thank you, Biani.
Yes. I actually wanted to say something thinking about my relationship to Christianity and how much as a kid I loved Jesus. Love. Like if you ask my family, we grew up Catholic and I loved my my rosary practice. I loved Jesus. Like just I thought it was so cool. I thought he was so radical and just as a kid having that relationship with this figure. And then as I got older and my family became more conservative and they went into Pentecostalism, I started to dislike Jesus. I was like, oh, the Jesus y'all talking about don't really resonate for me. That's not how I thought, and I think there's some wounds around my own healing too, because it has meant that the Jesus the Christianity I was brought into, being born and raised in, felt like a very judgmental practice, like that there would be no space for me as a queer person or as a person who loved their blackness, because there was a whole other layer of that in my Latinx family, a lot of the anti-blackness. And so, yeah, I think there's a part of my younger self that's wanting to hear from somebody who has a practice to Christianity that is in reclamation, right? Versus what has been my experience, that has been a lot of healing wounds around this idea that I actually couldn't be Christian if I was queer, or if I was unapologetically Black or radical, or having any kind of wish for liberation and freedom for my people. It felt like it didn't go hand in hand in my family system. And so, yeah, that's what I'll share too. And
Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that with us. Yeah, I think it's important to share not only our stories, but where we are in the journey. I feel like folks have just some preconceived notions about individuals who might talk about topics like religious trauma. And I'll say, maybe some preconceived notions about where we are in our journey, in that, know, um, our understandings and our integrations of things. And if I remember correctly, I think this was right before we asked, we told Erin, our wonderful guest that we'll have on here shortly, they mentioned something. And Biani, I think you said it, that you're still learning learning as you go, and I think that's why we're talking about this, right? Because there are aspects of this that we have addressed. There are aspects of this that we've supported our clients around. And also, just like the healing journey, sometimes you're not aware of how things might impact you until you're either triggered or, something happens, right? So this is like one of those moments to check in, at least for me. Let me say that. For me, it's a moment to check in on my own path, with not only unlearning, but also like this integration and embodiment place and where I'm at just in my spiritual walk.
I love that you shared that, because I also think there's this assumption that people make about people who are like spiritually inclined, or like oh, you've arrived, you've done that healing, like there's a lot of assumptions that are made. And I'm glad that for those who are tuning in, that you can see us modeling that.
Yeah.
Even for us, right, as like spiritual therapists, practitioners, like we have wounds that are calling for our attention and needing some healing and space, and that we're not above it, and that's spiritual bypassing, by the way. This idea that, that there are people who are like, oh, I'm spiritual and I've arrived and my nervous system is regulated and I have fully healed, like that is not true. Don't let them sell you that, honey. Don't let them sell you that, because that ain't it. And this healing journey is non-linear and lifelong, so yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you for saying that, and this is also another conversation that we were talking about before we hit go live. But there is the spiritual bypassing is happening, but also there's like this white supremacy aspect to it, like this guru mindset, like all, be all, and I feel like that gets applied in a lot of different spaces and places, and you can use that word very culturally responsive, right? Like all cultures have some word that could be interchangeable with what we would associate with the word guru, right? And so, yeah, I think we're down this rabbit hole around this topic to just address that. Talking about these intersections is something that I think will be important for a lifetime, like just the different aspects of experience. So here we are.
All right, y'all, let's get ready.
Yeah.
We are excited to bring in our guest.
Okay.
And they're going to join us and they're going to introduce themselves.
Let's do it. Okay.
Drum roll. No, I'm just...
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself to everyone. Yeah, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Erin. And I am currently in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I am on land previously stewarded by the Ottawa tribes, the Chippewa tribes, who are also known as the Ojibwe, as well as the Potawatomi and the Anishinaabe tribes. So that's where I am from. And that's where I'm hanging out. I'm actually from Illinois as well. So not Chicago. So I'm from the rest of it. There's a little more elsewhere. Let's see.
The Chicago in me just needed to come a little closer on the screen.
I'm not from Chicago. I'm not claiming Chicago.
I heard you
claim Chicago.
Yes.
I'm not from a suburb of Chicago that is trying to claim to be from Chicago. I know better. I absolutely know better. But let's see. I'm trying to think. Virgo sun, Libra moon, Sagittarius rising. That's where we are. So that's where my stars align. And apparently Apple Pencil just waving around. That's what we're doing today. But yeah, I'm excited excited to be here and to have this conversation. It was even just interesting listening to both of your stories and hearing more about your own history with religious trauma and even in this world of this bringing in the spiritual bypassing and all of those things. Yes, all of the above, absolutely. So yeah, I'm excited
There's
to be
so
here.
much there. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us and giving us like some of that reclaiming soul work intro that we just love so much, especially with your big three. I would love to hear more about your work, Erin, and yeah, like how we got here.
So a lot of my work right now, a lot of my work and a lot of my ministry involves really looking at the intersection between Christianity and authenticity. And that's kind of where this whole journey for me started. And I grew up in a relatively conservative, a Black conservative church. So definitely has kind of the Baptist Pentecostal roots in there. And it was definitely I've figured out later that was very, very conforming, very much just there was one way to do things, but I didn't realize that until I started to move outside the lines and discover the queerness of it, or queerness of myself. And then I realized, oh, there's only one right way to do this. There's really only one way to exist in this world. And I figured out that that wasn't true by going to a conservative Christian college. like in the strange world of, how you go to college and you start to get and you meet other people, or you get outside of where you were growing up and you start to meet other people and realize that there are other ways to do things. And I realized at a conservative Christian school that queer Christians existed after I was told in a very similar way. I'm assuming that you all were told that queer Christians just didn't exist. Like, that's not a thing. And it's wild to me that, once again, conservative school, it's actually gotten a lot better in the recent years since I've graduated, but very conservative, to the point where there were hours and the men and women couldn't be in each other's rooms after certain hours. And I'm like, oh, because that stops activities from happening. Yep, sure. But a lot of my work from there has kind of devolved into, okay, so how do we, or evolved into, how do we have a relationship with God that is fully authentic and fully about who we are, and about who we were created to be, and how is that relationship real? So that kind of put me into the queer realm. I was diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago now. So that's been pulling into a lot of my work as well, and figuring out, okay, really, all of these rules and all of these things don't work for me. So how can I create a relationship with my creator that does? Because I think I tried some other things and I'm like, no, Christianity works for me. Like, me and Jesus, we're cool. We're good. So this works. And it's everyone else's kind of aspects and everyone else's thoughts around it that aren't working for me and for the people that are in my circle, the people that are in my church, the people that are following me online. Like, there's all kind of this thing of, this doesn't work for me. What can?
So I mean, I want to say how I found you, because I'm pretty sure I was like, how we got here was that I found you on IG. I think it was through the Holy Cigars. Okay, so a podcast that I really like, that's all about deconstruction of Christianity. And I think I found your page, but one of your like IG, your reels was around how you don't read the Bible every day, and it kind of went viral. And I think what I resonated most with was like how people were responding, like the kind of, people's perspectives around it, and how there was a way to be Christian that you were challenging, and I kind of, I'm curious if you could say more about that reel, and like this whole idea
Yeah.
of like, be Christian. Can Black queers be Christian?
Yeah, there was so much in that reel, and that was baby's first viral. I'm gonna say that. So, and it's still, but it was literally just a shot of me, and it was saying, "Hi, yeah, I'm an ADHD Christian preacher, and I don't read my Bible every day." And apparently, that was a really controversial statement, and I was not intending on it being a controversial statement. So I was very, very surprised when I had to turn off my comments, because it started to get really vile and gross. And I'm like, why are we doing this? And I realized that people were, coming and doing the thing where they're just dropping like the 1 Timothy 2:12 verse saying that women can't preach. I'm like, that's where we're stuck? We're stuck at women can't preach. Really? Really? We're not moving past that. Okay, cool. If that's where we're stuck, then don't go to my page at all. But really, and the caption was really meant to talk to more of my neurodivergent humans, and saying like, you don't have to do this whole thing where you read the Bible every day. If your goal is to connect with your creator every day, then connect with your creator every day. Your creator doesn't live in this book. And by thinking your creator lives in the book, like I was the one who thought that the Bible was God's diary growing up. Like legitimately, I was very much confused as to why the first verse wasn't in the beginning when I stepped into chaos and I created the heavens and the earth, and I did all of these things, and I'm amazing and wonderful. And yeah, it was great. Like that's what I thought the first chapter just should have been. So it was very much a matter of, you don't have to read this book that some men wrote thousands of years ago in order to connect with your creator. Like you can take a walk in nature, you can meditate, you can choose to connect with other people as your connection to your creator that day. You can read a freaking devotional. Like it doesn't have to be the actual book. And I didn't think it was going to be that controversial, y'all. I really didn't. But yeah, I had to turn off the comments because people were coming for me for a variety of reasons. Some of which were, you have to read your Bible every day. To which I responded, thank you so much for your feedback and opinion. I appreciate that. And the rest of them were coming still for the issue of, you can't be queer and Christian. I don't see any neurodivergence here in this video, which I'm like, how do you even see neurodivergence? First of all, I don't know how to make an ADHD face. Is that it? I don't really know. And overall, it was just a very interesting experience because I realized I kind of live and put myself in a relatively liberal Christian bubble. So that was a really eye-opening moment of, oh, I'm in a bubble here. Because even the area that I'm in, I call the Bible collar. So it's very relatively conservative Christian, especially as you go out of the city by any stretch of time. You step outside the city and it turns into very, very conservative very, very quickly. And yeah, so it's very interesting. But overall, the goal was to just say, you don't have to do this one thing to connect with your creator. There are multiple ways to do this, and not all of them include cracking open this ancient book every single day. Even though I love this book and it's a great book, it's fun to study, it's fun to look at and pick through and to see all of those things, but that's not where God lives.
Thank you so much for that question, Biani, and Erin, just giving us like some context, to the video. It sounds like there were some issues with many of the intersections of your identity. Was there anyone that seemed more interesting or challenging to process through? I don't know if my question is landing. Like, was there anything that you found surprising? Like, I know that you started off with the women can't be pastors, preachers aspect. Is that the one that's like, it's 2024, like out of all of them, this is the one? Okay.
That was a little bit of just like, it's absolutely 2024. So really we're starting there. And maybe I was just too many intersectionalities for them to really deal with. So they're just like, let me just pick one. Maybe it was just one too many. Maybe they only had the energy to do that verse and didn't want to list all of the supposedly anti-queer passages that they could come up with, all 7 of them. But I think that one really was a bit surprising to me, but I also know that that's real. Like, I have people in my family and in my immediate circle that have come up against ordinations and have come up against even affirmations of their own calling, specifically because they were or are women. And so that still exists. And I think that, yeah, maybe that does surprise me the most because it was the one that I brought up out of everything. So it's just like, if that's where we're starting, wow, you've got a long way to go, friend. Like, and it's okay for you to have a personality outside of 1 Timothy 2:12. It's okay for you to have biblical knowledge outside of that. And it's okay for you to look at anecdotal stories of situations that happen versus just the words. Because if you look at the anecdotal stories, you'll see that the very first preachers of the gospel of Jesus rising from the dead, like of that good news, were women. The first people to carry that message after seeing Jesus, like, hey, like, go tell the people I'm alive. That was Jesus going to tell women to preach the gospel. So if we can look at that and look beyond these words that were in a letter, why are we reading somebody else's mail? First of all, if we can look beyond the words that were in this letter that was either to or from this community that Timothy may have written, but maybe didn't, and look at the words that Jesus spoke, then we can see some different aspects of Christianity that we don't always tap into. Like, even Paul himself later says, yeah, I was a little harsh in those earlier letters. Like, let me chill a little bit. So even some of his later writings are a lot more chill than some of his earlier writings, which is overall fascinating. But yeah, that one, I'm shocked I'm surprised that surprises me so much and that I have so much passion around that one. And I think it's just because it's a, wait, really? Overall sort of thing. Whereas coming up against anti-queerness in Christianity is, yeah, that happens. That's a daily occurrence. And that's almost a dime a dozen. Like, oh, you're not for queer Christians. Cool. Yep, I've heard all of those. And the anti-women was just kind of like, oh, that's a fresh take. Thanks.
You mentioned being a preacher, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually curious about, and I probably am going back and forth, but thinking about, like, why do you think that people believe queers can't be Christian? Given your experience as a preacher, you went to a Christian college, like, where do you think that kind of comes from? And have you experienced that in your... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of it, I think, just comes from the concept of, like, repentance and the confession of it. And there's if you are choosing to live in sin, if you're choosing to identify with this quote unquote sinful nature, then obviously you can't be Christian, because as a Christian, you have to identify with these certain things and you have to identify with Christ. And if you're identifying with sin, then you can't identify with Christ. And I'm like, there's a lot of that happens. I think there are 7 different passages in the Bible that are all supposedly anti-queer. And they aren't. They aren't. We can go into that if you want to, but they're not. And I think there is this kind of indoctrination and this overall misunderstanding and misuse of the spiritual practices and the spiritual journeys of one person being blanketed across everyone. So there are moments where there are kind of sides to this, and there's one side of queer Christianity that says, yeah, you can be queer and Christian, but you can't practice. So there's people who might identify as some flavor of queer, but they're celibate. So they're not engaging in relationships. They're not having sex. They're not doing anything that might be considered acting on the urges that are behind the queerness. I also think that we get into a place of boiling down queerness to simply sex. And when we do that, we miss out on everything else that there is to queerness and to queer relationships, and to be able to queer some of the other things in our lives, along with as well as how we read and approach the Bible. We can queer those things too, and we can start to look at, these are the mainstream things that we see. These are all of the things that are being taught to us. How can we flip all of that on its head? What else might this be saying to us? How else can we engage? And I think a lot of the people who are saying you can't be queer and Christian also haven't looked at other ways that they already queer Christianity. They're not looking at other ways that they already think that, oh, I follow all of these things, but that's garbage. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to. I'm like, you don't realize that you're already picking and choosing, and you're already starting to kind of make your own way in this. And yet, because I don't follow this specific version of what you want Christianity to be and say, since I don't fit your mold, I don't fit the mold. So it's interesting. I like that question because I think it kind of forced me to try to get into the minds of the people who are in my comments going off, and trying to figure out, like, what are some of these things. And I think a lot of it is just indoctrination and fear, and not really even truly seeing that there's another way. I've even had people even like come into my DMs and say, wait, so you say you're a queer Christian, say more. Does that mean that you used to be queer and you're preaching that God loves you? And I'm just like, I think it's pretty clear. And their response was, if it was clear, I wouldn't be asking. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, well, I'm going to send you this post that very, very clearly implies that David, the David who wrote the Psalm supposedly, and Jonathan, his lover, were like sleeping together. Like that. I don't think I can get much more queer affirming than that. And I'm just like, that's in there. So I sent them that post, and then I didn't hear anything else. So I think I think I was understood at that point. But I think a lot of people just literally can't fathom it, because everything that they've been taught, especially, everything that they've been taught has been, there's only one way to be Christian, and that does not include queerness by any stretch of the imagination.
Erin, I appreciate you like rooting us into that, like the sort of experiences that you're having, and like this idea that it's really true, this idea that it's hard to even fathom that queer folks can be Christian. And I also want to add this layer around Black queers being Christian. And I'm curious about, so part of the podcast, part of this series is around also holding and honoring the lived experiences of Black QT plus folks who've encountered religious trauma and spiritual abuse. And when I hear you speak, I feel like there's I wonder, you mentioned being in like in a liberal space, but I wonder if you have had or witnessed experiences like the traumatic experiences that fellow Black queer Christians in your life may have had. And can you share some examples with us of what that was like or what it looked like for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, for sure. I actually, part of my experience is when I came out, I was put through a bit of a conversion therapy experience. So I am a conversion therapy survivor. I do know that my experience could have been so much worse than it was. And at the same point, I also realized that no, my experience was my experience and it was still garbage. And there was like moments of isolation. So I wasn't able to I wasn't technically able to talk to my queer friends in those moments. And when I had to, and part of that is because they thought I caught the gay. So yeah, my gay best friend at that point in time sneezed on me one too many times and I caught it. So I couldn't chat. I couldn't talk with him. And that's, I think a lot of my experience in that wasn't necessarily becoming unqueer, but it was learning how to lie and learning how to fly under the radar and learning how to shrink myself and not be seen. Learning all of those different things. So there are some of those experiences that happened earlier and younger in my life. And they, I think, made me want to seek out something different. Because I was the church kid who was born and raised in the church, who was there every time that the doors were open. And it was such a part of my experience, and my entire body and my entire culture was wrapped up in it. So that wasn't a moment where I was just ready to throw God and Jesus away. I was perfectly okay saying goodbye to the people in the church. Like I definitely was just like, yeah, I'm one of those people who kind of experienced the church hurt and was ready to walk away from this church. But I also knew I was 16 or 17. I didn't have the power to walk away from that community. I wasn't able to do that. So, and there was the moment of public shame that also went with that. This was in the era when if you made a public error, then you had to make a public apology to your community. So that was one of those moments where I knew that I was supposed to go up front and speak before my church. And in my own form of protest, I went through the motions, but decided I wouldn't actually speak. So I went up there and essentially I like looked at my pastor and I'm just like, I'm not saying anything. I'm being forced to do this, and anything I say is not going to be sincere. So, and I knew that at that moment. And so even though I went through the motions to be like fully reinstated into my church or whatever, because I wanted to be able to continue to engage with my creator in the ways that were good for me, which was in that moment in time, it was serving and singing in the choir and in the music ministry. And that's just always been my life. But I did what I needed to do to get back in right standing while also protecting myself a little bit. So there are those moments. And I think as I have stepped into more affirming Christian spaces, I have definitely felt the loss of the cultural aspects around Black Christianity. Because you can't replace Black church. And especially in a place where it's in my bones. It is in my bones. And that was one thing that I realized that was kind of keeping me in the Black, or in Black and non-affirming spaces, was my connection to Blackness. So I knew that when I walked away from, the last time I walked away from my Black church, my Black Baptist church that I was a member of for a while, I knew that when I walked away from that, I was honestly almost walking away from a lot of my direct connection to the Black community in my city. It's a lot harder to integrate myself into Black society in my city if I'm not a part of a Black church. It's a lot harder. So, and that's something that we have to kind of decide as Black queer Christians, is where do we want that honor to be? Do we want to honor the Blackness, or do we want to honor the queerness when it comes to our Christianity? Because there's not a whole lot of spaces where we don't have to choose. At least not in my area, not in the North, not in, I don't think we're a big enough city to have those things. In fact, in order to get anything close to the worship style that I wanted, I found my pastor, and he essentially, like, he ushered me into this kind of world. But I met him, and I'm just like, here's what I'm looking for. And he's like, cool, that's what I'm trying to create. You want to do this with me? So in order to get anything close to a worship style that I wanted, I had to create it. Which still is, it blows my mind that we've been doing this for as long as we have been. And it's been about 5.5 years, I think, since we met. And we were kind of doing this thing, but it was really, really hard to walk away. And I stayed a lot longer than I should have for my own mental health and all of those things. I stayed a lot longer than I should have. And I had to hear it from the mouth of the pastor at that church say, no, that's not something that we're really going to be looking at or looking for. And that's not really a conversation that we're going to have in these ways. And here are the things that this church believes in and how we're going to act with our queer identified members. And that was like, okay, I've heard it in plain language in black and white. And yep, it's time for me to actively start looking for another faith community that can support me and meet my needs.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you so much for your response to that question. I feel like there are so many layers, to this. Again, another kind of piece from a conversation that we were having prior to hitting go live on StreamYard. Biani and I were talking about Black church culture and the norms of that culture, and how many folks are brought up in those spaces, many of us brought up in those spaces, and we have this socialization around kind of what you were bringing up too, Erin, about ways to be a Christian. What does a Christian look like, and things like that. And I feel like there is this piece of identity development, identity that is so important as it relates to the mental health challenges that especially Black, queer, and trans folks experience related to religious trauma. And so, that can go in a number of different directions, right? So identity meaning like, who am I in this space? Who am I planning to be? Who am I trying to be? Who can I be with the support of these? Who can I become with the support of these people? And like, if you are having those questions in spaces that you're experiencing violence and harm, right? What does that mean for you? With my clients, that's kind of the area that I focus a lot on with them, is related to identity, reclaiming, self in those spaces, acceptance of self in those spaces, right? Because the messages are that you're right, the queer Christian people are not even supposed to exist. So yeah, just being accepting of who you are in that space because of those messages and things like that. And so as we wind down, I would love to hear, like, if you have any additional thoughts about like the mental health challenges that you've kind of seen come up, or what that looks like maybe in your practice, and addressing maybe some of those aspects for yourself, or even, again, supporting other folks.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the mental health challenges that I still struggle with, and that I see a lot of the Black queer Christians around me struggle with, is a lot of kind of that isolation that I was kind of hinting at before. But it's a lot of the isolation, or it's a lot of, I've gone to other communities and I've tried this at other places, and how do I know that this is going to work for me this time? What can I do to try this again? And that's a lot with religious trauma in general. But I think with all of the intersecting identities that come with being a person of color, that come with being queer, and then when you throw those two together and tack on the Christianity, somehow a lot of neurodivergence comes in. I've noticed that. I don't know why, but it's just, there's a lot of that flows into, but there is just a lot of doubt and a lot of, will this be safe for me? Which is where the isolation is almost a coping mechanism. It's I don't want to try again. I've been hurt so many times before, or I've put my hope into this place because this particular church says that they're welcoming, and they say that, we all people are welcome. And then you start to get in and you start to invest in this community, and you realize that all people are welcome doesn't necessarily mean that all people are included, or that all voices are heard, or that that all experiences are valid. So it ends up turning folks away again for one reason or another. And whether that's racially, whether that's based on sexual orientation, whether that's based on other pieces of someone's identity, there's a lot of isolation that comes with the specific religious trauma of being at the intersection of being a person of color and being queer, or being Black and being queer. And yeah, I don't fully know how to overcome that. Yeah, I'm still kind of working on that myself. And that's one of the things that I can struggle with. And I think part of that is, yeah, it's a coping mechanism. If I stay isolated, then I don't have to get hurt again. And if I do that thing where I go to church and I just go for me and I leave, and then but that's not why you go to church. That's not why you invest in any community. You don't go to a community just to hear some good speeches and good music and then leave. You enter a community for the people. And if the people that are there aren't supporting you and aren't loving you and aren't there for you as a human exactly as you are, then what are we there for?
Yeah, I'm really grateful because you highlighted a lot of themes that I think folks can really resonate with around the isolation. And yeah, I think maybe we can naturally move into main takeaways, and I'll share my takeaway. Um, this time always feels like it's not long enough, so I just want to share that. But I'll say one of my main takeaways, and then hoping that you all can share too, is what's landing for me is this piece around what it means to be a Black queer Christian. And I've noticed it with other survivors, like folks, survivors of religious trauma in different like kind of experiences, is the isolation. And it is the other piece around like feeling like you have to choose your blackness or your queerness. And that grief, the grief has been like, that's the takeaway for me, that it's true. There is this other grief of like, what does it mean to choose, right? Like, and what does it mean to live authentically ourselves might mean that we can't be in like traditional Black church spaces, because it often means we still have to hide, right? And be less of who we are. And so that's something that's really landing for me. And I'm really grateful for what, how you kind of took us there, Erin. It's so complicated and layered. But yeah. What about y'all? Any main takeaways from today?
I can go unless Erin. Okay. Well, my main takeaway is kind of centered around this piece, and your reflection, Erin, about gender in Black churches. I'll just say Black churches, gender in Black churches. Okay. And it reminds me of an essay that I was reading in this Black women's mental health book. And it talked about how, one of the things that is important for mental health practitioners that are working with Black women around trauma is to focus on their spiritual religious practices, and that many Black women specifically, have some type of socialization or upbringing as it relates to, some type of religious practice. This particular book mentioned Christianity, and being a Muslim specifically, for examples. But I'm bringing all that up to say, if you identify like me as being Black and queer, and thinking about your deconstruction walk, your spiritual practices now, especially if you're someone who doesn't necessarily attend or go to, kind of mainstream church settings, what does that process look like to reflect on how you're socialized as a woman identified body, gender, patriarchy? How do those things come up with this topic around being Black, queer, and Christian, and how are you reconciling, being in spaces or being affiliated with a religion that you can walk into certain churches and that could be a norm of theirs, right? Because all spaces don't believe in that particular norm, but some do. And now in 2024, right? And so, like, how do you reconcile that? If I identify as a Black queer Christian person, a Christian woman, right? What does that mean to unlearn that men are providers? What does that mean to unlearn submit to your man? What does that mean to unlearn purity culture in a Black queer woman identified body that got those lessons but don't believe in none of that, right? So that's kind of where I'm sitting with the conversation about why can't we be Christian? For being Black and queer.
That's a lot. The purity culture, that's a whole different, I think, yeah, wow. I feel like my biggest takeaway was that apparently I am decently upset that people are still upset that women are preachers and pastors. Apparently I need to do some more work on that one. I wasn't prepared to be as triggered by that as I apparently was. But I honestly also think that there's this piece that you were just saying, Sequoia, and talking and adding to that, this concept of exploitation of queer talent in churches. because you can be queer as long as you in the choir and don't say nothing about it. Just gonna leave that there. But there's this moment of and kind of this exploitation of queer talent in churches, and we won't say anything about it. It's kind of this don't ask, don't tell of Black queerness, and we know that there's there, and we can see the struggle when you try to have a girlfriend. We see it, sweetie. We do. It's okay. And even the isolation that can still be in the middle of that, in the moments of, it seems like I'm accepted, but I'm only accepted because of this one particular thing. So I realize I probably just dropped whole new things, but just thinking about and like letting the conversation stew a little bit. So yeah, apparently I'm more mad about people being mad about women preachers. But yeah, also that the concept of that just popped in my head, and I needed to get that out. So sorry.
Well, we appreciate you for getting it out. No sorries. Yeah, there's so much that is like still coming up for me, and I'm feeling really grateful. And for those who are, watching, tuning in, if there are things that are coming up for you, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. We want to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, I do want to mention really quickly, we had some comments over on Instagram that I just want to read on this side, because Instagram is doing something weird. So I just want to, say it on for YouTube. M from Literapy NYC made a comment on our Instagram and just said, this conversation is so needed. Check out The Day God Saw Me as Black by Unfit Christian. And she linked that IG page. So either that's a book or maybe a live stream to check out. She also highlighted the question of, how are you reconciling being affiliated with a religion that does not honor you? And yeah, I think that, those are, again, just amazing. That question is really like sitting for me. But then also, that's another recommendation for some folks to check out some things. That might be another resource that might be supportive. So I'm sorry, Biani, for interrupting you, but I just wanted to make sure to bring that in, because the Instagram chats don't show on the YouTube side. But we love our Instagram family. Thank y'all for being here with us.
Yeah, shout out to everybody who's watching, whether you're here with us live or watching the recording. We really appreciate you. And we do want to keep this conversation going. This is why we're doing what we do. We want to keep having these courageous conversations about religious trauma, spirituality, healing. It's nuanced. These conversations are really nuanced. And, maybe this is also means that we got to just have you back, Erin, which I always say. I feel like every episode I'm like, we're going to bring you back. But, we know we have to keep this conversation going. But in the interest of time, Erin, can you tell our audience where they can find and follow you online, and also let them know of any offerings or services that you have that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah. You can find me online. My Instagram handle is faithxwtf. And that is where I do most of my hanging out. I have a devotional coming out. We are still editing. I have ADHD, y'all. It's done, but it's not done yet because we're still working with our brain here. And it'll actually be a short series, but if you want updates on that, feel free to follow me on Insta. It will all be over there.
Great. Y'all, this was such a great episode. Thank you for being with us today. We really want to keep this conversation going. So share your thoughts or questions with us, please. We'd love to hear from you. And we will be back soon with another episode. So make sure you stay tuned. Thank you so much for being in community with us and supporting a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. Y'all, stay connected. We really want to continue to build this spiritual healing practitioner therapist community. Subscribe to the channel. Don't leave without subscribing, y'all, and make sure that people in your life know about Reclaiming Soul Work. So make sure you like this episode and share it with somebody. When you subscribe, you can set reminder for notifications when we release new episodes, and sign up on our landing page so that you can hear of future offerings. And we have a monthly newsletter. So make sure you go to our landing page, reclaimingsoulworkpod.com, to sign up for the newsletter. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. Shout out to Erin. Shout out to Sequoia. And Erin's IG handle is FaithX, right? WTF? Yes. Yep. So somebody just asked again. But yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. And we'll see y'all next time.